Okay, we are live.
Okay, thank you so much, Josephine. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this January 11th meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Committee of Community Board 10. My name is Anthony Marino. I'm the chair. And tonight, I believe we just have one major discussion on the docket about the installation or potential installation of neighborhood loading zones in our community board area. And with us tonight is Leroy Branch from the DOT with his team. Again, good evening, everybody. Welcome. Happy New Year. Happy holidays and all that good stuff. Leroy, I throw it to you.
Well, I'm going to actually pass it off to Matthew, who will make the
go.
presentation of the neighborhood loading zones. Can we allow him to share his screen?
Yes, he is enabled.
All right, Matthew, you can introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, Leroy. Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year's. It's good to be back. My name is Matthew Rosa. I'm the project manager for the Neighborhood Loading Zone program. And the first time we were here, I was here. We went over the program a little bit, what the program is about, and how we were planning on expanding into CB10. So let me just share my screen and make sure it's working. Hopefully everybody sees my presentation. And yeah, so this will be a quick update on the program, as well as the last time we spoke, I brought up the portal, online portal, suggestion map, and wanted to give you the results of the suggestion map and where we wanted to expand based on the results. So if everybody can see my screen and hear me all right, I'm assuming I'll just go right into the slides.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, we can see.
Great, thank you. So yeah, quick overview of the program, the Neighborhood Loading Zone program. So the Neighborhood Loading Zone program is intended the goal is to provide a safe space by the curb for any vehicles that are conducting pickup and drop off of goods and passengers, mainly in narrow residential streets, but also depending on the type of buildings and the demand for space, we do sometimes place it on more wider corridors as well. But really the goal is to reduce double parking and other unwanted behaviors on the street. Might be blocking bike lanes or on crosswalks and so forth, and really let the vehicles park by the curb to conduct their pickup and drop-off activities, leading to safer streets for all road users. Currently, we have 146 neighborhood loading zones throughout the city. We've been continuing to expand the program, all 5 boroughs, and later on, I'll go through some of the locations that we'd like to place within this community board. The signage regulation is, we're hoping to get 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., no parking. That will be the standard signage that we have. Additionally, we will have our pedestrian level information board that will have a quick overview of the program and what the intentions are of the space. So back in 2021, when we presented for the first time, I brought up the suggestion map where anybody from the community will be able to suggest a location for neighborhood loading zones within the community board, the district. And we received 85 total suggestions within the month that the map was live online. And from there, DOT, we have assessed the locations and tried to identify the best placements for neighborhood loading zones within the corridor. Just quickly about the suggestions, it was a mix of locations within the district. A lot of them were more towards the west of 5th Avenue, more above, I'd say 80th Street. That's where a lot of the suggestions were concentrated. It was both for commercial corridors, which that really wasn't what the program was necessarily intended to. So for those types of suggestions, we can definitely review them and see what other methods we have within our toolbox to improve the conditions in those corridors. But again, we would like to focus on some of the residential corridors for this program. So based on the suggestions, we are thinking of having 31 locations total of neighborhood loading zones within the district. These are again based on this. These are based on the suggestions as well as assessments from DOT, and we're thinking they're focusing on mostly narrow streets, but also we have a few corridors that are relatively wider that we believe that the neighborhood loading zones will benefit within the flow of traffic as well as safety of the blocks. And yeah, we'll quickly go over some of the locations. We're thinking really the narrow streets from any of the streets, for example, 72nd Street, as well as some of the other side streets that may contain a bike lane. A lot of the locations have been focused on streets that are either have a bike lane or there is a bus route. So there are some other wider streets such as Bay Ridge Parkway that we believe that the neighborhood loading zones may improve the conditions as well. Slide. This is just a quick example of the locations through our observation that we looked at. Again, Bay Ridge Boulevard is a wider 2-lane street, but we did see a good amount of double parking that we believe with the neighborhood loading zones would improve the conditions of the street as well as traffic flow. And narrow streets such as 72nd Street, where if a truck is parked, double parked on the corridor, you really can't pass, a vehicle can't really pass the truck, as well as it will be blocking a bike lane. So hopefully by providing an open space by the curb, we can really reduce the amount of conflicts that are occurring right now. So really, through next steps, we're planning on installing the signs early spring. By meaning early spring, we believe sometime mid-February till later, so later March. We will continue to evaluate as the signage is going to be installed. We'll continue to evaluate the use of the signage, and we'll make any modifications that are necessary. And this would be based on our observations, as well as we'll be looking for community suggestions as well. The community suggestions can be made through the email address that are on the signage, as well as this feedback form that is linked here that hopefully this presentation will be distributed so people can access the form. Excuse me. And one more thing, the portal, although the specific portal for CB10 will be closed, there is a suggestion map open to all locations that the neighborhood loading zones have been expanded. So if there are any additional suggestions that a member of the community would like to see in neighborhood loading zones, they will be able to make those additional suggestions through this link from the map as well. So that is a quick update of the program from me. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for that update. So this is something, so as the new chair of this committee, this is something that predates me being in charge. So Jane Marie, if you have any feedback, I read some notes from the last meeting. I would throw it over to you guys if you have any questions, concerns, comments, all that good stuff.
Thank you so much, Anthony. One of the things that was a little question that popped out right away was you referred to, in the presentation, it was referred to as Bay Ridge Boulevard.
Yeah,
it looked kind of like Ridge Boulevard to my eye, but it could have been Bay Ridge Parkway or Bay Ridge Avenue. So just to confirm that, please.
Yeah, I had the same. That was going to be my question too.
Yes.
It is Bay Ridge Parkway.
Yes.
3rd and 4th Avenues.
Oh, that wasn't Ridge Boulevard? It looked like Ridge Boulevard to me.
No, that was Bay Ridge Parkway between 3rd and 4th Avenues.
Okay. And then this was the other
About that.
the shot of the map. I think maybe that the board members might like to get a closer look at that shot of that screen that you have up now, so that this way, if anybody else does have some follow-up questions, that would really be helpful. So this way we could get a better idea of what they were referring to.
I think that map is up, the final 31 locations. Again, can you guys see that map?
Yeah.
Okay.
Matthew, can we get this presentation that we can send to the community board?
Yes, of course. Should I send it to you?
Yeah, just send it to me.
Okay.
Can I just ask a few questions? Like I see, it's not directly related to locations, but I might have missed one of these meetings, which is rare, Leroy. But what form of enforcement are you going to use here? In two ways. I mean, like how do you how do you keep people from? I'm looking at it and I'm saying to myself, it's not just the enforcement of people that are going to be in the this special zone. Okay, it's also like take a FedEx guy, and if you take a typical street in Brooklyn, if depending upon where you put it, even if you put it in the middle, they're still 200 feet away from something. They're just going to drive their truck down, and they're going to park it if it's on even on the street with one of these loading zones. They're going to just park it because it's too far. In other words, does one loading zone really, a residential loading zone on a street, actually handle this?
Well, we're looking at it from the perspective that it will help. Can a truck driver still double park? Yes, they can. Will they all use it? We're hoping that they will. We can't force them to use it. From the perspective of the truck driver, we're hoping that they will find it easier to be able to pull in, unload their goods, and then pull right back out, and not block traffic. So we're hoping that they use it.
What about the enforcement then of making sure that they use it? I mean, are you going to give them tickets? Are you going to, FedEx?
No. We can't force a truck driver to use these spaces.
Are you going to give them tickets for double parking?
No, because
people want to get their packages.
Yeah, technically they can still double park. There's no Matthew, unless I'm wrong.
How do they technically double park? Is there a law that says they can double park now?
Yes. If you're loading and unloading, you can double park and block traffic as of right now. Now, unless they change the rules of New York City, right now, if you are loading or unloading, you can double park and block traffic.
But that's loading or unloading. If you take, the vast majority of this problem is being caused by Amazon and by those kind of trucks who are not loading this. They're getting off and
they're just unloading.
They're delivering mail for all practical purposes. So are they included in that rule?
Yes, any commercial vehicle could unload and block traffic, but they have to be in the action. You can't just stop and walk away. You have to actually be unloading at the time, but you can double park. That's the way the rules are.
Sure seems a little amorphous to me as to what they're allowed to do there, pal.
Right.
Doris.
Anthony, I'm sorry, I have a list of questions.
I received the email.
Thank you. First, Leroy, we're a very thorough board, and we have been through many DOT issues, and we say, what are the regulations? What are the regulations about neighborhood
loading zones?
Right, with the sign.
Thank you.
I'll give that over to Matthew. Matthew, what
Right,
would the sign say?
because many times DOT has come to us and said, well, you don't meet our warrants. And you say, well, what are your warrants? And we said, well, we can't tell you that. So we are asking, what are the DOT regulations for neighborhood loading zones?
I'll give that to Matthew.
Yeah, so the regulations for the neighborhood loading zones are currently no parking regulations. It's exactly the same as no parking regulations, which allows for passenger pickup drop-off as well as pickup and drop-off of goods, loading and unloading of goods.
Is that codified?
That is codified, yes. It is a no
Thank you.
parking
Could
regulation.
you send that to the board?
Yes. Yeah, I can do that.
Matthew, are
And-
there times associated with it, or is it just strictly no parking?
So currently we're looking to add no parking. So that, yeah, so that's a good question. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday is what our regulations, what we're planning for our regulations.
And at the locations you have chosen, how many double parking tickets have been issued there, and how many 311 calls have been called in for this problem? Because remember, this is a board that looks at data.
Yeah, we
Did
haven't.
you look at any of those?
We haven't looked at specific double parking tickets for the corridors. The placement was based on suggestion as well as prior analysis of other neighborhood loading zones that we have been placed in other locations within the city. And just a little bit more about the placement of the neighborhood location loading zones related to the prior question as well is based on our other past observations. We try to place the neighborhood loading zones on really the hopefully the best utilized spot on the block. So that could either be really the beginnings of the block. So when the vehicle enters the block, it's easy to spot the neighborhood loading zones, or if there's a specific location within the block that we see or we assume that there would be a higher amount of double parking, whether that would be picking up and dropping off passengers or FedEx UPS vehicles, double parking to unload at that specific in front of that specific building. That's where we try to target for the placement of the zones.
Okay, so my next question is, there are several residential, there are several where there are two loading zones on a block, one on opposite sides of the street. That would create serious, parking problems. And is there any way they can be consolidated?
So yes, that's a good question. Thank you. So where we see two neighborhood loading zones on a block is on a two-way street. And from what we've seen in the past in terms of usage of neighborhood loading zones, we will see, for example, if we only place one loading zone on a two-way street, we will see use of the loading zones from the vehicle that is traveling at the same direction. And we'll still see a lot of double parking occurring at the opposite side of the street, coming the opposite direction. And by placing two neighborhood loading zones on a two-way street across from each other, we're trying to create a better solution where a vehicle would be able to access the curb, not depending on which way they're going, but whichever direction they're coming from, they'll be easily accessible to the vehicles.
And I would say on residential streets, and all the streets you're talking about are residential, removing 80 feet of parking for neighborhood loading zones is a bit excessive. And I would ask you to review that.
Yes, that's totally understandable. We can definitely review those. But again, the neighborhood loading zones we're trying to place where there is two neighborhood loading zones per block is where we really see a use going from two on both sides of the block. If we only see, potential use from only one side of the block, then we wouldn't necessarily place two, but we can definitely
I would
review
like
that.
to, you said you're addressing the use, and how did you define the use? It was what people said was a problem, not anything you did empirically.
So the use would be from our past observations from other locations that we place in neighborhood loading zone. We see, specifically in two-way streets, we will see neighborhood loading zones used by a vehicle that's traveling the one way, and we then, a vehicle coming the opposite way would not necessarily access the neighborhood loading zone on the other side of the street, which seems to be a common issue, and that's the reason we're trying to address is by placing 2 neighborhood loading zones.
And the portal was open to residents, but did you in any way contact the major delivery companies? The U.S. Postal Service, United Parcel, FedEx, Amazon, Fresh Direct, as a little example. Do you have any input from the delivery people?
So we are always in contact with their larger parcel carriers. For example, UPS and FedEx, we have a close relationship within our freight mobility unit. And we're always, as well as Amazon, we always are in contact with them to try to figure out the best solutions for their use as well as the community's use. So specifically for this district, we have not really received any sample locations, but anytime there is a space where they can pull up by the curb instead of double park, they're generally supportive of the placements.
Well, I would just say I think it's disturbing that they have not been involved in the process for our community board. And I'm going to give you my last question. If you look at the spreadsheet that was sent, there are various differences in the sizes of the proposed loading zones. Some are related to driveways and other things. Could you clarify that or send it to the board in a really visual presentation?
Yes, I can try to clarify that. So our standard length of the neighborhood loading zones are 40 feet. And so that's about 2 regular vehicles, regular sized vehicles. And we came up with this standard length to accommodate for relatively larger delivery vehicles, for example, a FedEx or UPS van, to easily access the zones without the need of either parallel parking or figuring out the best maneuvers to access the zones. And this has been this has worked in the past locations, implemented locations, and we're trying to keep that standard. And when the zones are shorter in length, that's where either a zone is adjacent to a curb cut, other no standing regulations, or as for example, fire hydrants or bus stops. This creates a wider buffer open space for the vehicles to access the neighborhood loading zones. And this way we can shorten the loading zones itself to, for example, 25 feet with the additional 30 feet of hydrant space that a vehicle can maneuver into the loading zone. And this way we're able to preserve some of the parking spaces within the block. And we try to, if applicable, we try to place neighborhood loading zones adjacent to all these open spaces so we can conserve the parking spaces for the community.
And I have one last question. We received a letter from the Department of Transportation dated November 30th. That we have 30 days to respond to this. Obviously things have changed. What is, I think the concept is great. I think there needs to be some more nuance, but what does our response time mean and what impact will our response be?
So if there are any specific responses towards some of the locations, as you mentioned, the locations where we place 2 neighborhood loading zones in one block, we'll definitely like to go back and review them and see if they are placed adequately. Also, if there are any specific locations that any member of the board believe may not necessarily help with improving the street conditions, we'll also like to review them as well. Just in terms of clarity for the signage, we are currently developing a rule change of the signage, and which will clarify the use of the zones a little bit more from the no parking regulations, and that way, hopefully, we're looking to hopefully increase the the amount of sorry, I'm blanking the word, the familiarity of the loading zones leading to better use as well. So as soon as we're able to go through that process, we'd like to work on that as well.
Well, that's not a specific time frame, so we're not, but you're not giving us a time frame to give a response, but you're going to start installing the signage in late February.
So when can we, provide our feedback here? Then.
So 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 when the letter was sent off, out, we did ask for a 30-day review. If there's a little more time needed, we can definitely work with that as well.
And how have these residential loading zones been received in other communities?
Oh, I can tell you.
What has been the response?
Yeah, so the neighborhood loading zones have generally had a mix of responses. A lot of them have been, the main. So as you can imagine, the main objection to the neighborhood loading zones are the loss of parking. But also we have been responding some good responses that the neighborhood loading zones have been used, as well as we have been receiving a lot of requests from different communities to expand the program in as well. So yes, it has been a mix of responses.
And I'm going to promise, guys, this is my last question. Would you be acceptable to changing the time from, what is it currently now?
Yeah, so currently it's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
To be 8 to 6, because that is more consistent with people who don't have parking and may use their cars, and would be more amenable to a residential community.
Yes, so some parts of the city we have neighborhood loading zones that are no parking 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if the board feels strongly about the time frame to switch to that the times, yes, we'll be happy to switch them to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's important.
Yeah. Diane, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I have two questions. The explanation that was offered previously is that these no standing zones would be used for passenger or delivery of groceries, or just dropping people off or picking people up. I'm assuming that also includes residential cars that are dropping off individuals or dropping off groceries or packages. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so what kind of enforcement will there be against residential vehicles? If there's no enforcement to be had against commercial vehicles, can I also assume that there's not going to be any kind of enforcement of residential vehicles who use these spots? Or are we going to be besieged by, additional tickets?
I got one.
Okay, I got one too.
Yeah, I got one.
I got one too. Dropping off this is a while ago, dropping off my mother who could not walk, and I got a ticket because I was in a no loading zone. So I'd like to know what kind of protection will the residential cars have against this kind of ticketing blitz?
If you leave your car, then they're going to issue you a violation.
That's wrong.
That's wrong. If
Hold
commercial,
on. The reason I say that is because first of all, we know it's the NYPD, okay? When they come up to a car, they don't know if the car has been parked there or if somebody has been there 2 minutes or somebody been there for 30 minutes. So I can't speak directly for the NYPD, but I can honestly say, just like any other no standing or no parking zone, if a car is there and no one's with the car, they're probably going to issue a violation.
yeah, that doesn't seem fair. If you're walking up somebody into an apartment who needs assistance, that doesn't kind of seem
Correct.
fair to me. That, well, that's,
Absolutely.
No, I understand what you're saying from a residential point of view. But the only thing I can say in terms of the NYPD is, how do they know that you just got out your car to walk that person? They don't.
That defeats the whole.
How
I
do,
mean,
the big question is, how do they know, Leroy, how do they know that the guy that's in the truck isn't having lunch? Okay, and just decided to park there under those circumstances. It's the same thing.
yeah,
I don't
I've
disagree
seen-
with
They're
I've
not
seen
gonna
that.
get a ticket.
I've
They're
seen
not
Right,
that.
no,
gonna get a
I
ticket.
agree with you, but that's really up to the judgment of the NYPD.
that was my first question. My second question is tagged on to what Doris said. I really object to the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. hours, and I would be more in favor of having it 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. because people come home from work around 5 p.m. and it's hard enough to find parking without taking away all of these spots to begin with. And I can attest to the fact that, starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the parking gets unreasonable. So if you're not allowing people to use these spots, even if it's 6 o'clock, I think that is much too late. Look at the number of cars or commercial vehicles that are making deliveries during that time from 4 o'clock on. It's much, much less than what's happening during the bulk of the daytime hours. So I would be more in favor of having it, 8 to 5 possibly, or even 8 to 4. I think that's a more reasonable, and it'd be easier for our residents to understand, why we're doing this, why the city is doing this, and it would just be easier to swallow that kind of a regulation. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Dean,
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Doris and Diane. I think the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is too long. If 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is already being done, I think every board member would probably agree with that. And if it's practical to do it for a shorter period of time, that's fine. But at a minimum, I think it should be 8 to 6 if that's already being done in other locations. And to kind of follow up on what Steve was saying with the trucks, I agree. Trucks loading and unloading should not get tickets. They're working. But who will get tickets if a passenger vehicle is parked in the loading station, which is a no parking area, the passenger vehicle will get a ticket, just like they do now. So, the residents are going to suffer again. Thank you.
thank you, Dean. Judith, you're muted.
I just want to reemphasize the point that Doris made, that all of these selections on the map were made by anecdotal information from other communities, but no studies were done what was actually needed in our community. I thought I heard you say, Matthew, that they picked two-way streets that you assume would have need for loading zones without any empirical evidence. I find that crazy. If I heard you correctly, it's not incorrect by misinterpretation, but if you just did it based on other communities' reports and there were no data for our community, I just can't even support this, even though conceptually we know we need loading zones, but the placement is just based on I don't know what. And the next thing is, if on the technology, we do have technology available, and if you're going to place loading zones, you can use the same technology used for parking apps that would allow people to say when they they parked at that loading zone to bring grandma up to her apartment and back. And it could be tracked easily and not just leave it at the discretion of the police officer, as Leroy said. That again, a very old-fashioned idea when we have technology that may be able to address these issues. If you're going to put new things in, you have to use new techniques. You can't just go about it the old way. So I find this misinformed and ill-advised.
Thank you, Judith. Jane Marie, how are you? Hear me? Oh, there you are.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to, just add in, when we had heard about this at the end of, it was in June of 2021, when it had been presented previously, and Steve, according to my notes, you were here that night.
Okay.
Got it. You know, and just to go back to that, when it was presented to us, it was also shared again that it was about 40 feet in length, that it could be in front of a residential building, that it's usually on the corners, that the times may be adjusted, that they would not be replacing parking meters, and that vehicles could park there when the zone time limit was not in effect. Community board members had lots of concerns about it, particularly regarding our open streets on 3rd Avenue. And that, you know, that's a whole nother issue that's being addressed right now, you know, with zoning and what that's going to bring to the community. You know, and we were told that the suggestion map was going to be open, I believe, just for the summer. You know, I believe that was going to be live for about a month until like mid-July, according to the notes that I had. So what's come, as Judy had mentioned, it's anecdotal from where residents have you know, address this, or it may not even be residents. So this was what had been shared. So just to, you know, kind of put those pointers back up into everybody's mind for conversation. Thank you.
Matthew,
Thank you.
quick question, Matthew. How long was the portal open for?
The portal was open for about 30 days, right from the day of the presentation given the last time.
Doris, do you have?
I would like to follow up on
Sure.
things that Judy and Jane Marie said. One of my big concerns is how many people, 85 people logged in and said these were concerns about recommendation for loading zones. How many people logged in for each specific site? And what criteria did DOT use to determine it?
So the suggestions are 85 suggestions, so that are basically one suggestion per.
We are a community board of 120,000 people.
One person suggested a loading zone, and now they get it.
So that's
I mean,
technically
come
not
on.
correct, because the placements are not exactly where the suggestions suggest, especially on commercial corridors. We're not placing neighborhood loading zones mainly on commercial corridors. And these based on the suggestions, we come up with the general locations where the neighborhood loading zones may work, hopefully. And then from there, we assess based on our criteria, which again was the corner, so beginning of the streets, as well as in front of large residential buildings and relatively narrow, mainly narrow corridors. And that's how the final locations have been placed.
Well, I would say the concept of neighborhood loading zones is very good, but I'm very concerned about the process, and it is not data driven. It's anecdotally driven, and I would like to see a better study.
Thank you, Doris. Yeah, I just from my own anecdotal experience, having, I work in Park Slope every day, and there are probably 5 or 6 of these loading zones around my office, and I can tell you from what I see, it's double parked. The delivery drivers don't park there; they double park in front of the spot, and so they're still double parked, and there's just an empty spot next to them, and they so I think that the concept is awesome, but I haven't seen a direct benefit just from my own experience, being around these loading zones now for probably 6 months or more. And then people just park there anyway. I also, you said you would start installing in February, and I think that, that too might not, that be ill-advised if a snowstorm. One day your car is parked there because of a snowstorm. Next thing it's a neighborhood loading zone, and now you're getting a ticket. Like, I don't know if February is, the best time to implement something. And the signage, I would agree with you, Matthew. If you're going to redo the signage, it definitely needs to be bolder, simpler.
Potential, yeah.
Because I didn't know what it was when I first started seeing them in Park Slope. You know, in some places, you know, there's a sign, there's one on one pole, and then there's no, you know, I don't know how big it was. So you know, am I in the loading zone? Am I not in the loading zone? And of course, one day I parked and I didn't see the other sign. Of course, I got a ticket and I had no idea that, because there weren't two signs, it was just one, and there was a hydrant, and the whole thing, you know, and the locations, you mentioned the corner, most of them I see are mid-block, at least in Park Slope. So I'm not sure, you know, how that was determined there, but ultimately I have to agree with Doris. This needs to be more, you know, empirically looked at with data, as opposed to anecdotal stories about, you know, where they should go. It's a good idea. I just don't know, like, are these the best spots for them? I don't know. That's my sort of piece on that, because
Yeah, definitely agree that we like to look at data for every single block that we like to place them. It's just as of now, it's really not feasible in terms of our use.
Or what if it is what if it is up to the block? I mean, what if it is, and like, what if a certain block can request something like this, like a speed bump, like that type of thing, you know, instead of this, like, you know, sort of these 31 seemingly random locations, perhaps, you know, a block association, or you know, if there's a need for it, you know, it's that way. At least then the block is saying, okay, we're willing to give up this 40 feet because we have an apartment building, and, you know, we need more, you know, people are moving out and people are, you know, getting deliveries. You know, that might make more sense, where the actual block can decide, as opposed to us just saying, all right, well, here are these loading zones, good luck.
I like that. That's good. I like that.
We certainly do. We certainly do receive requests from, for example, co-op boards or supers of larger condos, especially in Manhattan, and those types of locations. We do place the neighborhood loading zones as well. So we're doing focusing on several different approaches. Additionally, as a new approach, we do focus on corridors that have bike lanes, as well as other infrastructures that are often blocked by double parking vehicles. And this is one way that we're trying to reduce the parking conditions in bike lanes.
Certainly,
and to clear the locations for
absolutely,
cyclists and other road users.
But I think that instead of doing the 31, maybe rolling it back and saying maybe it needs to be a block decision. So I think what I'm afraid of then is like, all right, well, we'll do the 31 and see how it goes, and then we'll add additional ones. And that's fine, you know. But at the same time, I think you take a step back and you say, what blocks really need it? Let's talk to the people who live there. Dean, I'm sorry, you had your hand up. I'm done. I said my piece. Thank you.
I just wanted to be clear. This is not the community board approving this. We are being told it is being done, and we're trying to make it better, but in no way are we approving this. So when, you know, residents or whoever might object to it, this is a DOT decision 100%. This is not the community board making a decision. We're just trying to give some input to improve it. Because for myself, I would say, don't put any neighborhood loading zones, but that's just me speaking. So I just want to be clear on that. So we all understand, we are not approving this.
Doris, is your hand still up, or?
Oh, no, I never put it down.
Oh, it's okay. Larry,
Of
you're.
course, I could say a lot more, but I won't.
I know. Go ahead, Larry.
Could the religious institutions double up as a loading zones? So they have no standing and no parking at the religious institutions. It seems like a lot of space that could be doubled up as a loading zone at a religious institution.
So
well, usually delivery individuals, cabs, everybody actually use the religious institutions, no parking zones when they can, because, you know, the church usually uses them when they have special celebrations or funeral or something of that nature. But I've seen the delivery trucks use them all the time if they're delivering to that block.
It's a fait accompli.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just in the Mirage.
Yeah. No, I just, you know, this is one of those things where, like, on the community level, literally block by block, we could have very good input on, if these things work or not. And it feels like, these are 31 sort of, again, seemingly random locations based on anecdotal information. And, maybe there are blocks on Bay Ridge that could actually benefit from it. And they're not going to benefit from it because we haven't done, the research on it. So,
we're open to, and we'll be absolutely happy to continue working with the community board as well as each blocks and receive any requests or suggestions for neighborhood loading zones. That's actually our ultimate goal, is the whole reason of the suggestion map was to actually receive direct input from the community, where they would know best where these neighborhood loading zones will work and when they'll be helpful. So that was the approach that we would like to take. And from there, adding on to that, developing from that, we're absolutely happy to work with the members of the communities to determine the best placement of the locations. That's our ultimate goal. And this isn't really end of our interaction. As I mentioned, we'll be happy to continue to receive any inputs, whether working or not, and make any changes to the loading zones, the locations as we move forward. So I just wanted to make that clear that, as you mentioned, that sure that this, as what you're saying, is really what we really want. And hopefully we want to work towards that, to have a closer input by the community, so we can really determine the best placements of the neighborhood loading zones. We really wanted these loading zones to not only benefit the delivery vehicles as well as larger parcel delivery companies, but also the community, the cyclists, pedestrians, and all the residents of the community board, and hopefully improve the safety of the ultimate goal is really improving the safety and the efficiency of the street. So as you mentioned, I'll be happy to work with anybody that has any more input and place to build up on that suggestions.
So then when this slide says final locations, it should be final, right? Because you're saying that these are not then the 31 final locations, because you're still going to continue to work with us and hear suggestions about where to put these. So then this is not final. We're going to be able to give you, additional feedback, and then nothing is going to be installed in February because we're still talking about it.
So the final locations are based on the suggestions, but from there we're happy to alter any of the locations.
So you have to understand my confusion. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. So then these are the final locations, and they are going to be installed in February, and any further suggestions from the community board will only add additional neighborhood loading zones on top of the 31 that you're telling us are going to be installed in February, whether we agree with it or not.
And they can also be modified in terms of locations as well.
So these are the final. When it says final, we mean final.
Yes, these would be the placements of the locations moving forward.
I just wanted to clarify that for everyone who might have been just a tad confused by okay. Judith.
That was the question I was going to ask. So that on February, these signs are going up. What methodology, Matthew, are you going to implement to begin to get feedback? Is it just opening the portal? Are you going to do, how are you publicizing the portal? How are you going to get more information? So it's not just 85 people random who maybe, have an axe to grind, or a company they want to have a loading zone for. You really need to set up a methodology, and I want to know how that's being done. Or does Josephine have a suggestion about how we're going to get this proper input, because this is not proper input. And since it's final and we're stuck with these 31, although we want to be able to, if we're able to modify or add, what's the vehicle you're going to use to get information?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So in the future, we'll continue to study the locations. So this will be a quantitative study of the locations in terms of how many vehicles have been utilizing the spaces. We're planning to either conduct the studies on some of the selected locations, or also planning on having a larger scale studies in the future to have a very more detailed studies of each of the locations, sample locations, to really determine if they are working or not. And based on those, we can also alter or modify the locations as well.
So this is an experiment.
So this is a developing program that we're standardizing.
When you say, I'm sorry, when you say continue to study, can I ask what method you were using to study the placement originally that you're going to then continue? Because again, what I understand as we were talking to Doris, it wasn't so much a study as it was a lot of anecdotal information. Are you going to continue using anecdotal information, or is there empirical information, data driven system? And so how can you continue to use that if you didn't use that to begin with? I'm just confused. I'm sorry.
Where's the baseline you're starting at?
What's the baseline?
So when we study the uses of the neighborhood loading zones, we usually use time-lapse studies of the blocks. So we place the time-lapse cameras on the blocks to study the use as well as vehicle behaviors within certain blocks. And based on those sample blocks, we developed criteria that we presented in the past presentations. We are basing the placements based on our studies that we have. And as we increase the number of neighborhood loading zones, we will again continue to conduct the same type of studies, hopefully in a more efficient way, to really focus on the utilizations of the neighborhood loading zones and develop as the program grows, develop a stronger criteria as well as placement decisions.
Judith, is that all? I want to move on to.
And it's sort of the time frame. So if you're starting in February, when might we get our first input of time-lapse study analysis?
So to be clear, the February is the earliest, one of the earliest times we're planning to place the neighborhood loading zones. It may be a little bit later in the spring. The time-lapse studies, we will continue to determine the best time frame depending on the conditions. For example, if the pandemic would continue to worsen, or if there's any other conditions that may alter some of the time data collection periods, we're based it off of any data collection periods that we have.
Was the initial time lapse information shared with the board? I wasn't on the. Josephine, did we get, or Jane-Marie, did we get any time lapse information to determine these locations?
No, there was a portal that was made public where anyone.
I do remember the portal, right.
And then the ends, right, and then right before the break, we received the letter with the locations, and I reached out to Leroy, and
right.
So we planned this meeting today.
Right. So the research for the neighborhood loading zones will be done after the neighborhood loading zones are going to be installed.
Correct.
Okay. No, I'm just making sure. Jane-Marie, you're up next.
Well said.
Yes.
I
just wanted to add from our previous meeting, which again was in June 2021, so not that long ago. And as we said, the portal was only going to be up for approximately a month or so for community input. And that was the only place for community input. It was not that this was a board meeting or board suggestions in any way, shape, or form. At that time, we were told, according to what I had in my notes, that there had been a total in Brooklyn of 24 locations. And that included Sunset Park, Park Slope, and Williamsburg. At that time, that was what we had been told. And now I'm just also confused because the total neighborhood loading zones, according to what we had received in information in June, was that there was about a little bit over 100 citywide, 111 citywide. I had that down in my notes. And that it's confusing me as to why there is now such a big jump to 31 just in Bay Ridge alone, like within Community Board 10, a jump of 31 locations. So I just wanted to have a little clarification on that because in what was presented to us, it was like a few here and there in these very, very crowded areas. They gave us, I believe, 2 locations in Sunset Park being the closest that if we wanted to see kind of what it had, the nearest ones were located in Sunset Park from 48th to 51st Street between 4th to 9th Avenue. So it was like looking at our neighbors in our neighboring community board, it was a series of 4 blocks across and 5 avenues up. And now when we look at our map, which you see here on the screen, it's very different. It's really all over the neighborhood. And I know that suggestions may come based on different neighborhoods and different needs, but the numbers have just changed dramatically, which changes the whole picture dramatically for our community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane Marie. Doris, you have your hand. Oh, Judith, you still have your hand up, but
I think Stephanie hasn't spoken. She
Yeah,
has-
Stephanie, yeah. You're up. You're up.
Thank you. Just another question. After these loading zones have been implemented and the continuing studies done, which would include, if I understand correctly, further feedback from the community, is there the possibility that if a loading zone is determined not to be working for a particular area, can it be eliminated, not just modified, but eliminated? Or is it like traffic lights where once they're in, they're in?
That's a good question.
So we wouldn't compare it to traffic lights. They're definitely something that with the demand of the community, as you know, the reason the neighborhood loading zone program has developed is the change in demand and the streetscapes of residential neighborhoods. We've seen increase in delivery vehicles coming into neighborhoods, especially after during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's really depending based on really the change in lifestyles of people as well as the streetscapes. And that's where these programs come into play, where we're trying to adapt to all these lifestyle changes and new ways that people are receiving their goods. And that being said, yes, the neighborhood loading zones may stay for a long time. The neighborhood ends for some blocks. If they're really determined that they're not being in use, we may reconsider and remove the locations or place them to another location nearby that we see a more increase in. We would anticipate a more increase in the use of the locations. If I may just go back to the past concern about the how we have been jumped to 31 locations instead of some of the few blocks that we have placed in neighboring community boards. So this type of expansion is something that we are conducting after our phase. So sorry, let me just go back. So we have been expanding neighborhood loading zones in different phases, and our expansion right now, we're considering it to be our phase 3, which we are directly coming to the community, creating a community portal, suggestion portal, and developing a community-wide, neighborhood-wide expansion of the programs. In the past expansions, we've been focusing on several corridors that we see a use of where we see anticipate a use of the neighborhood loading zones. So it's a little bit different type of expansion. I can elaborate a little bit more if you would like on that, but that's the reason that we are seeing a larger jump or larger amount of neighborhood loading zones placed. And we're continuing to expand in this way and different community boards within the city as well.
Steve.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with the term neighborhood loading zones. From what I'm hearing, these sound to me more like commercial loading zones that are going to be on the residential streets and are primarily meant for commercial purposes. And the reason that makes a difference to me is that when people see it and they said, oh, they're going to put in commercial or neighborhood loading zones, I personally thought that the principal reason for them was for, well, you know what, we have to have some place to bring grandma out. Let's put it that way. I think somebody had talked about that before. And so a lot of people, I think, looking at it, thinking, the word neighborhood has a friendly, like nice feel to it, that it's intended for the people in the neighborhood. In reality, they're the ones that will use it the least and will be burdened by it the most. And so I think that that term in and of itself is misleading. And I think it means maybe why you don't get a wide view or viewpoints from the people in our community. And I just think that the very idea that somehow someone can get a ticket by parking in a neighborhood loading zone for the very purpose that it theoretically is intended, that you can load and unload like people, if you have to bring somebody up into an apartment like Judy's talking about, and then you have to worry about a ticket, they are of no value to the neighborhood from that point of view whatsoever. And I think that it's misleading. I think the name should be changed, and I think they should be called commercial loading zones within the neighborhood, something of that nature, so that when people look at it, it doesn't give them a warm and fuzzy feeling in making their comments. It's because I don't think that they truly understand what they're all about. They're principally about supporting the commercial interests who are making these commercial deliveries. That's what it's about.
Thank you for the concern.
Dean.
Did you say Dean?
Dean, yes, Dean.
Okay, yeah, I want to ask a question of Matthew, but then I want to make a couple of comments, please. So Matthew, being that you have these 31 final locations, how many parking spaces are being eliminated during the no parking time?
2 times 31. 2 times 31.
The simplest would be 2 times 31, but as I mentioned before, some locations are relatively shorter compared to others. So really depends on the size of the vehicle, but I would say anywhere from 50 to 60, 62 parking spaces within the whole neighborhood.
Thank you. Now, I have a couple of comments. Josephine could probably give a better time frame, but a number of years ago, might have been 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a fairly extensive and very inclusive survey done of the community about what problems we face, what could be done to improve things. The number one comment was lack of parking. That was the number one, I say comment, complaint from people, lack of parking. And most things that DOT is doing is decreasing parking. So that's one. The other thing, this sounds very nice, no matter where you go, oh, neighborhood loading zones, it's going to make things better. To me, this is a solution looking for a problem. The number of times that the delivery trucks actually block traffic is extremely limited. They use the hydrants, they double park close to vehicles. I don't see that as a problem. But again, I think it's a solution looking for a problem. I really do. I don't think we have the kind of complaints about parking that warrant this kind of a program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Doris, back to you.
We're a community board of a minimum of 110, maybe 120,000 people.
More.
And more, okay. And you are basing your decisions on comment from 85 people. That's less than 0.07% of our population. I think your data analysis is sorely lacking.
Steve, is your hand still up or you?
No, in fact, I thought I took it down, but
Yeah,
I'm having a hard time figuring it out.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I'm going to jump in again if I can, please.
Yeah,
You know, we're looking to add 31 locations where, if I heard correctly from Matthew, citywide, there's only 146 locations today. So we're going to add 20% just in Bay Ridge to the city total. This is insanity. I'm sorry.
Just so everybody understand, we're not only doing this in Bay Ridge, we're doing this citywide. So we're going to be adding a lot more citywide. So this time, and say by the summer, there's going to be a lot more than 111, as we stated before, plus these 31. So it's not just in Bay Ridge.
I want to see a better data analysis.
About just Bay Ridge 31 locations.
I understand what you're saying, Doris. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that I don't want you to think that it's just 111 and we're adding 31 in Bay Ridge. We're going to be adding this amount throughout the city of New York in different neighborhoods.
And again, I want to know how many people weighed in on each of these 31 sites.
We don't want to be the first. We just don't want to be the first. Don't make us the experiment. Go somewhere else.
Well, I mean,
So
there
we're
are
actually
there are, there, as I
started
said, there
to,
are other
yeah.
areas. I mean, but well, the thing is too, I noticed that a lot of the locations aren't like they're on major thoroughfares, so not even on like smaller
Right.
blocks, and that makes me think too, like the whole ticketing thing. I'd love to see a correlation, like how much ticketing is done on those streets to begin with, and now with the neighborhood loading zone, you know, it's even more accessible for more tickets. I mean, it's an interesting.
And
You know, we can sit here and hypothesize.
I was rather shocked that there were no locations or very few locations on 4th Avenue
Yeah,
or on Shore Road.
right.
Because-
Right.
But that's because they have space to get around.
Round, right. So focus is on narrow streets
Yeah, it's the narrow streets that it causes a block.
with, right, as well as streets with bike lanes. That's why.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Well, Carmen, yes.
Two quick questions. This is more for, I guess, Leroy. Once they do finalize this, do the local merchants and NYPD, do they get a list of where the loading zones are? And can somebody read me what one of the signs say? Because I don't know I've never read one because I haven't driven in a while. So I don't even know what the signage is on the sign, because I want to know, does it say no of overnight truck parking? Is that on that signage to make sure
Well-
that they don't take advantage of that space?
A couple of things. Yes, the
Okay.
NYPD will have a list of all the neighborhood loading zones.
Uh-huh.
Two, we don't want the commercial corridor deliveries to be done at these locations. Now, will
Okay.
some do? Yes, I'm not saying that they won't, but
Okay.
we don't want them to utilize this. That's a whole different program. If we want to
Okay.
put loading zones on commercial strips, we can do that as well. Number three, as everyone knows, unfortunately, it's not enforced. You cannot park a commercial vehicle overnight in residential neighborhoods.
Okay.
Yes, does it happen? Yes. Will it happen? It may, but they're not supposed to. It's just the law.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't know what those signs say. So,
Matthew?
So the signage for the neighborhood loading zones currently are no parking, 7 a.m. to 6 a.m., 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but we can alter that to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or other if necessary. So that is the same as any other no parking regulations currently.
okay.
It's not labeled then as a loading zone. It just says no parking. So
But
we
there's
know-
there's another sign, right? There's a little that you miss, because we're trained to look up at the sign, and the sign for the loading zone is not up. I mean, you could miss it because it's actually at site level, but we're not used to looking at site level, right? For signs, we're just looking up. What does that say? I think is what Carmen maybe is
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
It's like, I know it says neighborhood loading zone. There's a little picture or something. Is there other verbiage on that, or does it just say neighborhood loading zone? I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm going by what you said, that you missed the sign, so I don't,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Matthew. Do you have the verbiage of the blue sign that goes on the pole?
It's a blue sign
it's a-
on the
It's a
website.
little bit small, but I can send over.
Oh, I
the
got you.
signage.
Oh, okay, there. Yeah, that's
So,
it. That's
But yeah, so again, the parking regulation is no parking Monday to Friday,
It's
um,
low. You see, it's at
certain
the
times.
engine level.
The reason it's on the what we call eye level, pedestrian level, is we have a little bit more detail of the overview of the program, as well as what the zones are intended for. So that's where the signage is, so the driver can get out and actually take a look at it to get a little bit more detail of the program.
Okay.
And as mentioned before, we are working on developing a dedicated signage that will change the wording you see on the top to make it more clear that the space is intended for pick up and drop off.
In redesigning the signs, if you're planning, that one, the sign that currently is showing looks like a delivery man delivering a box. It doesn't show me delivering my grandmother. So I think, can you have a more flexible signage that encourages me to use it for that purpose as well?
That's a good suggestion. Thank you. I'll definitely look into that.
Thank you.
Larry.
Yeah, you considered, say, using paint, say, painting the curb with these neighborhood loading zones, say, blue, such
Right.
as, or even painting the street, putting a loading zone and NLB on the, painted onto the pavement.
Nice.
At least the curb, paint the curb blue.
That is also a great suggestion. Currently, we have not considered painting the curb, but in the future, we'll definitely look into that as well.
So in terms of the 31 that are coming to Bay Ridge, many people have asked about the consideration of changing the time, right, from the 7 to 7 to perhaps 8 to 5 or 8 to 6. Is that something that is going to be considered for the ones that are going to be installed in February, or is that something that's going to be considered for the ones that are coming after February?
We can consider those for the ones that we're installing in February or late.
The first round. We'll call them the first round.
round.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't want to hold you to February. go further out than February. Doris, back to you.
So you said the portal feedback was how you made many determinations, but DOT made several. Can you define to us how many of the loading zones were decided by the portal and people's requests, or how many were determined by DOT?
So if I may just rephrase that a little bit. So the locations are based both on the portal suggestions as well as DOT's assessments. The portal certainly helps determining the locations. They don't always necessarily, go with our criteria. So what the portal has helped us is to determine the types of corridors, as well as if there is specific concentration of specific corridors that we see suggestions. We look at that, and ultimately, the placements are based on our criteria as presented before. So it's not like one suggestion may come from the portal and the other comes from DOT. It's all a mix of assessments made finally by DOT.
So I want to reinforce one of my first statements is that you said based on your criteria, you have not effectively defined to us what are the criteria that DOT uses to establish neighborhood loading zones. And I think nothing should be done until that is clearly defined to communities citywide.
So the criteria of the neighborhood placement of the neighborhood loading zones, as presented in our past presentation, is mainly narrow residential streets where if it's a one-way street, it would be less than 45 feet in width. So as shown on the photo of 72nd Street, if a truck has double parked, a vehicle will not be able to pass. As well as two-way streets where we see a high demand and larger residential buildings.
Can you give us a breakdown of narrow streets and two-way streets?
You mean with the placements that we have right
yes.
now? We can follow up with that and give you more information on that.
Because I think your answer is inconsistent with what I see on the map.
Correct.
I could think of some streets like Doris, you're over on 99th, right? Like over on was it 100th Street?
100th Street. It's a narrow street. No, the only narrow street is Bay Ridge Place.
Right, and I don't see that on the map. Right, that's
And we don't need one because nobody weighed in because we have a fire hydrant and two driveways that every delivery person blocks, and they walk around the corner, down the block, around the corner. So I think there needs to be a better assessment.
Right.
And I think we need a breakdown of the decision process.
I did notice though, in looking at the list that was sent to us by DOT, that Matthew, these all seem to be located directly in front of very large apartment buildings. Is is that a formal part of the review process? The number of deliveries perhaps that are given in larger residential units?
Yeah, so from our past observations as well as studies, we've seen double parking mainly occur in front of large residential buildings. And that's part of our criteria is to place the neighborhood loading zones in front of location or in locations that we see a lot of double parking occurring in. So as mentioned before, not every vehicle may utilize the loading zones, but we try our best to determine the best placement on the block to figure out where we believe the loading zones will be used the most to mitigate the most double parking as well as other unwanted parking activity on the block. And we fully understand having a neighborhood loading zone would not solve all the issues of the street conditions. So neighborhood loading zones are really part of a wider improvements that our agency is making to improve the streets in the city.
What are those wider improvements?
So within, I can if you like I can go through them. So in terms of deliveries being made to residential neighborhoods as well as throughout the cities, we have several different initiatives that are starting within our freight unit, including the off-hour deliveries program, where we work with transporters and receivers, mainly on commercial corridors as well as commercial areas, to switch their deliveries to the off hours. Also, we have a cargo bikes program where we are working with delivery companies to switch to more sustainable, smaller modes of use. May not have been expanded within this neighborhood, but that's slowly growing within the city, as well as other initiatives that we are looking to work in the city with to really improve the overall view of freight movements within the city.
Thank
You can
you.
improve the freight movement by getting a lot of it out of Brooklyn. We are the major source of most of the truck deliveries throughout the city, and we need a relief.
Yeah, I don't want to be hated by saying this, but the reason that there's increase in UPS vehicles within neighborhood residential communities is because people are ordering goods, and those
I'm not talking about UPS and FedEx. I'm talking about tractor trailers. I'm talking about 53 footers, 48 footers, which are not allowed on city streets, but are on our streets.
We totally understand, totally agree with that as well. And that's not something that this program itself is really working to solve, but I fully understand what you're saying, and those we really are working to improve as well.
Thank you. Anyone else have?
Can I speak?
Yeah, you absolutely, Steve, please.
Okay, I just wanted to say, because I think we're drawing to a close here, if I'm not wrong, but I just wanted to say that I think Matthew did a very good job tonight.
I was just gonna do the same thing. Yeah.
I was very impressed with his knowledge and with his calmness. He should be applauded, and so I applaud him.
Good
Yeah, no,
job,
thank you,
Matthew. Good job.
Matthew.
No, thank
I
you.
was
Thank you so much.
I was gonna extend the same compliment. You were in the hot seat tonight, and you did fantastic.
No,
thank
this
you
is
for
good.
taking our questions and concerns. Really, obviously, we take it seriously, and I would imagine we may provide some feedback written, as a summary to what we spoke about tonight. We'll talk about that, but thank you for your time, Leroy, as well. Thank you guys for the time and the info.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
And if I could say, I love coming to CB10 because guys, no, really, you should know. And Josephine can tell you this. A lot of times we go to a number of community boards and they just say no. They don't talk about it. They don't give intelligent questions or suggestions. They just say we don't want it. And as you all know, we don't want it is not going to work. But if was stated earlier, if we can try as best we can to improve on what we're doing by the suggestions that you give, that's the best way for it to work. I mean, I of course, the best way I know Doris would like is more data, driven. I understand that 100%. But it's good to have a conversation, an intellectual conversation, rather than the argument and the yelling and screaming match. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Nice
Agreed.
job, Leroy.
And
Nice job,
I say
Michael.
thank you to the DOT for an excellent presentation and listening to our concerns.
We're
This has
anxious
been
for your
very informative.
feedback.
Thank you.
We want your feedback, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Couldn't end here.
Get ready for lots of feedback.
Okay.
Excellent. I look forward to the letter.
This would be a
Leroy,
strong-
you know us.
I look forward to the letter. I'm looking forward to the letter.
My wife has my feedback waiting on the table for me.
Josephine, is that all? That's all, right? Could there possibly be
That's all
more?
on the agenda. So, I mean, so it's up to your committee members now, if you'd want to, frame this in a letter to Commissioner Bray about some of the issues that, we may want to contribute in terms of an advisory feedback based on today's presentation. It's really up to you on next steps.
I mean, I think that would be wise to try to get some feedback as quick as possible before this potential February 1st rollout, to try to at least, get some of the changes, maybe at least the times, something. So I would certainly, make a motion for
When is-
that to.
When is the community board meeting? Is next week, right?
No, it's January 24th.
Then is there any way we could have another meeting? I think it's a little late tonight, but I'm saying and to formulate
Sure.
something to formulate a letter for the community board at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that too.
Anthony, I'll go over some dates with you tomorrow and I'll send it out to the
Absolutely.
committee. So that'll be a quick follow-up meeting to
Sure.
tonight,
Okay.
given the hour. Okay.
Okay.
And Dean, my husband has dinner on the table for me.
Okay.
See, when you have little kids, you eat early, so it's fine.
I eat early and late. That's my problem.
And,
Or like me, I do the cooking, so we ate early.
There you go. So that's the end. Do I have to make a motion? I always forget about this. Do I have to?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, please. I mean, Judith, yes. Steve, yes. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. We'll be in
Good
touch
night,
for a follow-up.
everyone.
As usual, a lively decision at the encounter.
So much
Good
fun.
night.
Take
Take
care,
care.
everybody.
Thank you, Matthew.
Night.
Good
Bye-bye.
job.
so much,
Thank you,
everybody.